Hello and welcome to Nikon Report, your weekly roundup of all the latest Nikon news and all other photographic announcements that we found interesting. It's Konstantin here, and on another side of the pond is...
Becky.
All right, okay, let's get straight to it. So we have some delivery update as usual, so we normally give you update every 2-3 weeks or so. So let's start with the United States. We have Adorama apparently is expecting Z9s to be in stock on August 11th. Take this information with a pinch of salt. And then B&H is currently shipping Z9 pre-orders placed in January. So here you have it. You have stock in August in a week, and then another company, big company, is shipping January orders. You never know. So, Becky, do we have any updates on anything from us?
Progress is slow over here in the UK. It is getting there, but it is very slow progress. We're just bit by bit getting through. So I don't have any sort of like big delivery news, but it's moving along. And I will say that if Adorama are expecting stock on August 11th, they will probably be sold out 3 minutes after they arrive. So don't hold your breath on that one.
Yeah, I think it's pointless to report now that Amazon has something in stock for like 5 seconds, you know. So yeah, we'll just leave it at that. But you never know. So do check them out. I personally think they'll just fulfill back orders. It is what it is. Let's move on to some other news. The news that came out literally just after we recorded the podcast last week, it was that Nikon released firmware update for their lenses. So we have firmware update for Nikon Z50mm f1.2, 24-72.8, and also 105 micro Z 2.8 lenses. So what did they fix, Becky?
So on these, they added support for linear focus ring rotation during manual focus when an option other than non-linear is selected for focus ring rotation range in the camera. So rotating the ring the selected amount takes focus from the minimum distance to infinity regardless of the rotation speed. This is important, we'll tell you in a minute. They've also added support for switch focus control ring rolls in camera. In terms of camera compatibility, as of August 2022, it's Z9 firmware 2.0 for C, which is the lens firmware, Z7 II C firmware 1.40, and the Z6 II C firmware version 1.40. So those cameras will need to be on those firmware versions in order to work with these settings. Now, this is a big update for videographers. Why, Con?
Well, basically, it's not only for videographers, but also any manual focus shooters. So let's say macro photographers. That's why I think 105Z lens is there, because when you shoot with macro, you generally would use manual focus. But what it does effectively, it adds a focusing on the lens like it would be on a regular lenses back in the day, so manual focus lenses. So effectively, let's think about this way. So all Nikon Z lenses, apart of the NOC lens, which is manual focus, obviously, all Nikon Z lenses are what they call focus by wire. So effectively, it's not a mechanical focus, but it sends the information to the camera and adjusts focus in this way. So before, what we had a non-linear type of focusing enabled on this camera. So effectively, what people call it is logarithmic as well. So effectively, when you focus, if you move the focusing ring slowly, it will adjust the focusing distance very slowly, and if you move it really fast, doesn't matter on the actual distance the focusing ring traveled, it will adjust focusing really fast, so let's say maximum up to infinity. Now linear behavior of the lens, which they added now, and that's what they added, basically a custom setting in the menu, which you need to update the lens firmware for, is effectively it will focus depending on how much the focusing ring you move on the lens, so like a traditional manual focus lens would do. So that's what we didn't have on that system, and for videographers it was a big no-no, because obviously if you don't use autofocus, let's say follow focus or something like this, but proper videographers use generally manual focus, they would have some sort of focus pullers attached, etc. So they need that behavior. But also when you're focusing manually in general, so let's say with macro lenses as well, we all have kind of muscle memories. We all used regular lenses, AFS lenses, F-mount lenses back in the day. So we have an idea how the lens should perform when you're using the focusing ring on the lens. And it wasn't the case with the Z system lenses. So they finally introduced it now only in Z9, Z6, and Z7 Mark II cameras. So hopefully more will follow. And only the 3 lenses, so 24-72.8, 51.2, and 105 macro. So I personally hope that we're going to see that them releasing firmware for all the Z lenses they release. So it's just, I think, a first step. Maybe they still gathering the feedback from the users, etc. And then I think it's important that we will see it also in all other Nikon Z cameras. So early Z6, Z7, Z5s, but also DX systems as well. I don't think it's a hardware issue per se, because focus by wire. I think it's a software issue, and they just need to create a code for specific lens. But I think foundation of the code has been created now, and that's what we see with this first batch of firmware updates.
Agreed. And I am very glad that they've added the 105 macro, because not having linear focus capability on that is quite tricky if you're used to manual focusing with your macro lenses. So as you say, it's good to have added it. 51.2 is a nice one to have in there as well. And obviously the 2470 2.8 is the kind of go-to for most working pros. So it's a good start. Let's see if they add it to other lenses, and definitely hope that they add it to other cameras.
Yes, absolutely. It's just non-linear way of focusing. It's in a way where it has its benefits of changing the focusing distance really fast or really slow. It's very unforgiving in a way, or it's not very predictable in a way. So you can't really judge how slow, how fast you have to move the focusing ring. While the linear focusing is effectively, it's the same distance, and you can actually adjust it in increments as well. So if you want to focus faster, or you can adjust in a custom settings, maybe if you want to focus slower, you'll focus slower as well. But the actual distance, the focusing ring will travel, depending on the setting, won't change. So that's the good thing about it. So yes, you say 51.2, a lot of people shoot shooting at 1.2, which is very shallow depth of field, and in low light it may be very difficult. So sometimes you want to slightly adjust the focusing by using the focusing ring. So you can do this now with a lot more predictability to the lens compared to before. So I'm very excited about this. I think it's an important update that we definitely will see more of that in the future.
Excellent. All right, next up, Amateur Photographer have published a list of the Nikon F mount lenses that have been discontinued in the last 3 years. A lot of this is not new news to us, but we're going to share it anyway. To date, Nikon have actually discontinued 35 of their F mount lenses in the last 3 years, which is quite a considerable amount. And looking at the list, it's most of them.
Yes, I mean, before we start to scream RIP F mount or Nikon doesn't give an F, let's think about it. So 15 of these lenses are actually DX lenses, and all of them have AFS motors. So they were released in the last 10 years. Some of them were replaced as well. But let's be honest, DX format on F mount has been done for a long time. A lot of people who are using DSLRs nowadays are generally switching to full frame bodies, except probably D500.
I was going to say, or for D500 users, I would say that the vast majority are using it for long telephoto, professional, semi-professional work, and so would lean towards FX lenses over DX lenses, because ultimately you get the full benefit of an FX lens on a DX body. So it does make sense not to be investing more time into producing DX lenses when the majority of users are probably going to be using FX lenses anyway.
Exactly. And then another 12 lenses of this is AFD type lenses, though they're really old ones that were introduced when, you know, the film cameras were around. So we're talking about 51.4D, 1AD lenses, etc., etc. They don't have autofocus motor built into them, so it's not AFS type or AFP. So effectively, if you put it on a Z camera, it will be manual focus only. But also keep in mind that those lenses actually were replaced by either the G equivalents, so they would have AFS motor built in, but also won't have aperture ring, so they would work with the camera by controls of the body of the camera. So those were either replaced with the basically equivalent, or let's say in case of, let's say, 24 or 28 mil, they also had 1.8 version, or let's say 35 of 2D was replaced with 1.8 G version as well.
Yeah, and then of the remaining lenses that are on the list, all of them were released more than 10 years ago, and 5 of them have actually been replaced with newer equivalents in the last 5 years or a little bit longer. So, for example, our 18-300 5.6 was updated to a smaller, more compact 6.3 version. The 2470 2.8G, which is an old faithful, that was replaced out by the EVR version a few years back to make it more robust as well for working professionals. The 70-200 2.8 was updated to an FL version, and that has nothing but rave reviews, a vast improvement over the VR2 version. And the 70-300 AFS-G, which had been around, I think, since the D70 era, possibly even the D100.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. That one was updated to an E version. And again, the improvements were necessary and also made it more compatible with newer cameras. Obviously, some of the old lenses that have been discontinued for good, like the old DC lenses and the AFD lenses, as we've discussed, it's sad to see them go, but I think with R&D going into the Z system now, it makes more sense to produce Z equivalents of those.
So yeah, do you think it's a bit of a misleading title? And I understand this is a slow week for everyone, and, you know, news websites are kind of struggling, to get the clicks that they need. And obviously this article has been picked up by literally by everyone. So, but if you start to look at those and you think that actually some of the lenses were actually replaced by the other lenses, then, it doesn't make sense. But I mean, let's be honest, Nikon will discontinue more F-mount lenses. Let me tell you that I can probably publish an article that Nikon discontinued about 50 DSLRs since D1 came out. It's a matter of perspective, if you see what I mean. I understand we need to get a very clickable headlines, but at the same time, we also need to think a little bit, I would say, more level-headed, and obviously understand that Nikon will stop making F-mount lenses at some point. Nikon will stop making DSLRs as well. It's just a matter of time.
For sure. So yes, I think that it is a little bit misleading, and everyone that reads news in any field of life should really just, take it all with a little pinch of salt.
And a bit of pepper.
And a bit of pepper.
But get them while you can. Get them while you can, absolutely. Lots of dealers are still have them in stock. Different regions have different lenses available as well. So if you are an avid and dedicated Nikon F-mount user, then if you're a collector as well, do get those lenses while you can.
There you go. All right, next up, Nikon have temporarily suspended orders for the SB500 for dealers. Now, this little speed light is the one that goes below the SB700. It is actually the kind of entry point now that the SB300 has been discontinued. But they issued a notice regarding temporary suspension of orders for some products and resumption of orders for some other products. But due to delays in supply of parts for the SB500, it's going to take them some time to deliver the product to customers. And so that's why they've put everyone on pause. They said, "We sincerely apologize for any inconvenience caused to our customers. We will continue to monitor the situation and make an announcement as soon as it is confirmed. We will do our best to deliver it as soon as possible, so we appreciate your understanding."
All right, but on the bright side, Nikon in the same notice also stated that they resumed the orders of SB5000 flash, which was out of stock for quite some time. So if you have one on order with a deal or someone else, hopefully they will start to come through. So that's the good news. But Becky, what's interesting as well, Nikon rumors thinks that Nikon is done making flash guns completely, and it just outsourced all the production to third-party manufacturers like Nissin or Pro Photo. What is your take on this, Becky?
I think it would make a lot of sense for them, particularly with the amount of demand they have for other things and, reduced capacity and production and so on and so forth. But speedlights might just be that one final headache that Nikon don't want to look at anymore, and therefore are outsourcing their production. So is your thought that they're outsourcing the production to Nissin, for example, and then just badging them Nikon, or what's your thought? Or they make everything and then they send them to the Nikon factory to put inside a Nikon housing?
Well, it's very interesting because from one side, we know that Nikon was working back in the day with Nissin on some flash guns. So that happened before. We also see Nikon releasing Tamron lenses with the Nikon shell effectively. So I don't mind them outsourcing it to third parties, but I also want to have Nikon branded flash guns. Doesn't matter if they manufactured by other companies. For me, as long as the quality control is there and they're good products, it's just nice to have. There's some staple accessories you need to have in your lineup, in my opinion. And flash gun is one of them. Flash guns are, in my opinion, also are due for refresh because we now have a mirrorless system and old F-mount flash guns. I mean, they're obviously fully compatible with the Z cameras, but I think just a basic redesign and introduction of radio triggering system instead of infrared, which most of the flash guns have, and this B5000 has a radio trigger. So I personally think it needs to be up to date. It needs to have high-speed syncs, etc., and it will need to have a Nikon logo on it, in my opinion. So while I think that outsourcing is maybe not bad, I personally think they need to have those accessories Nikon branded in their lineup. It's just, for the system, I think it just makes sense, especially if you're a professional photographer, you looking at the whole system, not just the camera or lens per se. Good. Okay, well, let's move on to your favorite bit of news is Nikon Financials. Just a thought of coming to Financials just made my life that is here just overheat and stopped working. I mean, the heat in London, which is 30 degrees right now, didn't probably help it as well. But apologies for the lighting now, so it could be a little bit harsher. I know you internet detective will point it out anyway.
They will. They will. So you can't win with one way or the other. All right, let's crack on with these financials before I change my mind and regret all my life's choices.
All right. Well, let's start first. So Nikon has announced the financial results of the first quarter of 2023 fiscal year, revealed increased revenue and operating over the year profit in nearly every segment, including imaging product business. So we're going to talk obviously about imaging product business. We're not really going to concentrate on any other parts of Nikon since we will bore you to death. But just to give you an idea, so the actual revenue was 145.6 billion. That's up 13.4 billion. Operating profit was 15.3 billion, and that is actually down 4.6 billion. So that's what it is. Imaging products business increased 11.2 billion and revenue in 4.4 billion, which is pretty good. I mean, there's a whole thing that was a currency exchange weekend yen. Didn't help it, but it is what it is.
So in the first quarter, this is Q1, Nikon's presentation materials show the revenue and operating profit of its imaging products business was 61.2 billion yen and 13.6 billion yen, respectively, for Q1 for the financial year 2023. That is an increase of 22.4% and 47.8%, respectively, compared to Q1 of the financial year 2022. So we're looking at year on year. Isolated, that's an impressive increase, but Nikon hasn't necessarily had the best couple of years throughout the pandemic. So how does it compare to Nikon's pre-pandemic numbers? Well, it's actually fairly well, Con. Let's run through the figures.
Okay. So despite making 6.1 billion yen in less revenue in Q1 2023 compared to Q1 2020, that's effectively a first quarter of 2019 calendar year, so nearly a year before COVID. So we're comparing basically a year before COVID and effectively, shall we call it year after COVID? I mean, it's still there, but it seems that at least the news agenda has moved on from this. So apparently COVID doesn't exist anymore. So, No. So effectively, Nikon's operating profit this year is 10.1 billion yen more than was pre-pandemic. Of course, it's likely that 2020 operating profit was largely impacted by company switch to mirrorless. So if you think about it, then obviously they had to invest a lot more money to switch into mirrorless. So into research and development, manufacturing costs, etc., retooling, things like this. Just retool the production line probably will take quite a lot of time. But also what happened in between as well, Nikon switched and improved their manufacturing. So a lot of factories were moved from Japan to either China and Thailand. So that happened as well in between. And obviously it took genuinely longer during the COVID time to adjust those tooling and productions on different factories because obviously Japanese engineers couldn't travel for quite some time.
That's right. Still, though, to see revenue back to where it was before the pandemic is reassuring. It appears to reaffirm Canon's recent statements, which suggest that the camera industry has bottomed out. As for how Nikon is making these gains, it cites the weaker yen and the shift to mid to high-end camera models for pro and hobbyist photographers. And Nikon expects the gains to only increase as the year goes on.
As a photographer, do you think that camera industry has bottomed out at this stage or not? The reason why I'm asking is, yes, that was the case, but then we are in a small recession as we speak. Well, the whole economy, it seems that the trend that we will have a very mild recession, but we will still have it. And obviously a lot of stocks due to inflation have dropped in value as well as Nikon's and Canon stocks at the time, etc., etc. But what it also means that high inflation reduces the buying power. So not many people will buy more equipment while it's getting expensive. So my question is, have we reached the bottom yet? And we are on the uptrend, or we're still going to go lower before the actual raise? But at the moment, a lot of camera industry analysts say that we actually are in recovery mode. And if you look at the CIPA numbers and BCN rankings, you can see that mirrorless sales are improving month by month.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. I think that's a question for our viewers. What do you think?
In terms of sales, so they sold combined mirrorless and DSLRs in one quarter of 200,000. Then 340,000 lenses as well. And then we start to see, obviously, the Coolpix cameras, which their compact unit range is shrinking. They only sold 40,000 of those. Speaking of which, the little financial blog called Nikkei just published an article saying Panasonic is getting out of compact camera business. So it seems like Nikkei will continue to publish saying Canon probably stopping their printers and Sony is stopping PlayStation 5. So you never know. Let's see how this little blog Nikkei is gonna do its news coverage. But yeah, sales are very interesting. Let's go to the forecast. So Nikon is projecting revenue up of 36.8 billion year on year, and it's 5 billion up compared to last year. They're still aiming at high value, high margin items for high-end models effectively. At the same time, we start to see products like Z30 aimed at lower end of the market, and obviously big stores. You never know. Let's see how it goes. They're also expecting to increase their operating profit by 8 billion year to year as well. So they're saying that expect to increase in expenses such as development to improve product competitiveness. So aka Z8, I would say.
Yeah.
And overall, I would say that they are positioned really well for this.
Yeah. Let's see if they can keep up with those projections and promises that they're making. In terms of competitiveness, let's have a look at their forecast for R&D expenditures, because obviously that means new things coming out. That always excites us. So in the imaging products department or area, they are looking at spending 27% on R&D, which is actually only a little bit short of their 31% that they're expecting to spend on precision equipment R&D. So for our imaging products, it looks like we're going to get about 17 billion yen. That's what they're forecasting they're going to put into R&D for this coming period. Very exciting.
Absolutely. Well, to be honest with you, I'll take it really. But, it's still 2% above. So it's 17 billion over 15.2 billion compared to last year. It is lower compared to pre-pandemic year, where they spent 23 billion on R&D. But as we said before, that was the time where they were switching to mirrorless. So that would require a lot more research and development just to make sure that they will get those mirrorless cameras right when they're released on the day one.
Exactly.
Okay, well, now let's have a look at the sales. So effectively, they are looking at to get 27% of their sales in the United States, 16% in Europe, and then Japan is a surprising 17% and 22% in China. So if you look at Asian market, is effectively adds up to about 39%. And we have also other markets, which is 18%. Now, let's be honest, this is not just for imaging products, it's just overall sales as well. And if you're looking at imaging products, they are looking at 42% of all sales to be the imaging product sales, which is really good. So it's 40% of all sales of Nikon is imaging products, which is, I think, is really, really good. And then the next slide that we see is actually sales, which we covered before, them projecting the sales for the next year, and they are projecting to sell about 200,000 units for DSLR and mirrorless cameras. So what do you think, Becky? I think Nikon is doing pretty well in post-pandemic, and they've done a really good job of getting through that very difficult for everyone period of time.
Absolutely. So to highlight some points for those of us that don't necessarily listen to the facts and figures, Nikon are actually coming out of the COVID pandemic era very, very strong. They have an excellent lens lineup. They also obviously have this mount, which is essentially universal. We've already seen that you could put Sony lenses onto it via adapter. I imagine that that's going to keep going forward and only make it stronger. Yeah,
and it does work really, really well, surprisingly. So a lot of people who have Sony cameras now have a very viable option of switching to that system.
Exactly. And there's still a large number of people who are excited and looking forward to what comes post Z9 era, as in, is it a Z8? Are we going to get some high resolution, all singing, all dancing ZD850 equivalent? And so that means there's quite a big pool from which to get more customers buying into the mirrorless system, which obviously makes everyone very happy.
Yeah, I think Z8, whenever it comes out, we'll pull a lot of DSLR users who are still waiting for that camera, because obviously Z9, while it's a fantastic camera and it's a cutting-edge technology, it's not for everyone due to its size and weight, etc., etc. So I think a lot of people waiting for Z8 release. Everyone has it differently. I did poll on my Instagram account saying, what is it? Is it high-res body? Is it, let's say, a mini Z9, or is it a video camera? And split was pretty much even. So everyone wants something out of it, and it's different from everyone else. So what we see is really a lot of people waiting for this next release of camera.
Yeah. Now, another thing that worked in Nikon's favor is that they completely revamped their production facilities in Japan, Thailand, and China, and that showed good resilience despite the chip shortage, which obviously affected so many industries, not just the imaging industry. The Z9 backlog actually could have been way, way worse. It's almost cleared and is kind of being handled much better than the Canon R3, which is still tremendously delayed.
And then, yeah, let's look at their finances. They are sitting on a pile of cash. Their accounting is very straightforward and healthy. They just built in a new headquarters as well, which is really good. So overall, I personally think that they're well positioned for the future. And obviously, if you look at the stock has been healthy. And obviously, we had bumps, as everyone had in the last 3 months because of the, inflation recession. But actually, if you bought your stock on 1st of January this year, it was, I think, about $10.80. It's at the moment is $11.69. So it's actually up about 7-8% compared to the last year. And that's actually is really, really good compared to other tech stocks, if you can have a look at those, because a lot of stocks are down at the moment. If you were, let's say, buying an ETF tracker, something like Vanguard Global Cap, then you'll notice that those are still down a few percent. So overall, the stock has performed really, really well. And that just means that the company is positioning itself for the future, and the investors who buy the stock is doing really well. Now, we also talked about stocks buyback, which brings the value to the shareholders, so they continue to buy their shares back as well. That's been happening for the last 3 years, and they will continue to do it throughout the year. So a lot of positive things happening from financial point of view, the way they run the company, the management, etc., etc. So I think overall we are in good position to see out the future together with Nikon.
Great. We are still waiting for the Q&A part of the presentation for the financials, and we will report on that hopefully next week, but as soon as it's available.
Absolutely. And for more information, do have a look at the peer review article that does look at financials of Nikon pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. A lot of interesting information there. On the back of Nikon Q1 Financial Report, Tamron also announced their financial results for the summer of this year, and effectively, a couple of things there that made me interested in this. So what they said is the sales of our own branded lenses for conventional single lens reflex cameras decreased due to shrinking market, which is understandable, but sales of interchangeable lenses for mirrorless cameras, for which we are concentrating on new products due to the strong market, increased. The important bit here, what they also said, that OEM orders also increased. OEM orders can be something like Nikon ordering parts for Tamron to release their own lenses. So I'm looking at you, 28 to 75 2.8 lenses. So very interesting. They also saying that they will continue to sell OEM parts, and they're hoping to release this in the future, and they're expecting it to increase. So by their forecasts, and also release the additional 3 lenses, which will make 5 in total this year. So my question is, do you think we'll see more Tamron lenses from Nikon this year?
I would truly love to see some more lenses that are of a more affordable nature. If indeed the 28 to 75 is what we think it is, then maybe we will see what we've been asking for, which is a 75 to 300 or something similar. But I'd also like to see third-party brands like Tamron, like Sigma, specifically Sigma. Nikon, are you listening? Sigma.
Sigma.
Being able to produce their own mirrorless lenses with a licensed mount from Nikon, because it won't hurt the Nikon system in any way. In fact, it will only make it stronger. So I'm hoping that we'll get both. We might have some collaboration. We've seen that Nikon are doing that, and a lot of photographic companies do that. And also those companies being able to produce Nikon Z lenses in their own right. So here's hoping, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, what Sony did back in the day when they just released their mirrorless system, and they were first of the bunch, and they basically said to all the manufacturers, release your lenses for us. And the idea is obviously to have a really good lineup of lenses straight away, and then to increase your sales this way, because when people buy the cameras, they also want to have a look at the systems and what lenses are available for it, because obviously depending on their type of photography, they will need specific lenses to do this. So Nikon went a different approach. They decided to kind of release their lenses first, and in my opinion, they will open them out to third-party manufacturers, but it seems like they, at the moment, are a little on the fence. And I understand the point of capturing the sales effectively. You want to sell as much of your own brand product as possible, and that will push your sales figures and will help research and development of the future products. From the other point of view, just to be competitive, I think the more the merrier. We definitely need to have very big players in the lens space like Tamron and Sigma. We do have Chinese manufacturers. They're there. That's fantastic. And we're starting to see a lot of autofocus lenses from TT Artisan and Wheeltrox but we need to have big players in the place. The importance of those is the cheaper, a lower price entry point for a lot of users. So they will buy a product and then maybe they will buy cheaper lenses to start with a brand, and then eventually we'll end up with the Nikon lenses. If you ask any professional photographer who's been using the cameras for quite some time, they always will say, I use Nikon lenses first of all. And the idea is, yes, you're starting with your work, you buy third-party lenses, and eventually you upgrade to the best. And Nikon lenses, Z-mount lenses, are very highly regarded. They're well known for their image quality. So in terms of this, I don't think it will hurt you that much. It's good to have, let's say, 50mm a cheap offering. I think we need to have something like 51.8 at £200. I think it's, very important. The Nikon offering, well, is fantastic in terms of optical quality and sharpness. For a lot of people, it's unobtainable. So you really have to make decision which lens you need first, etc., etc. So I agree with you. I think it's important to open up the mount for third-party brands. We need this, as I say, Sigma and Tamron. We need this, not just Nikon branded lenses from the other manufacturer.
Exactly.
All right. The next one up, some of you may know that Japan has been affected by the torrential rain in certain prefectures along the Sea of Japan, with the weather agency continues to warn landslides and floods in wider regions. Apparently on Thursday last week, roughly 540,000 people were urged to evacuate at one point due to those rains. So Nikon issued a statement stating if your camera or your Nikon product was affected by the floods or rain, they will give you a discount on the repair. So I think it's very nice gesture from Nikon to do this. And they've been doing this in the past. We've covered that before.
It's a good move from them, absolutely. Now, more Nikon news. A new digital issue of Nikon Pro has just come out. We'll include a link to it in the description box in the podcast notes for you. I don't know if they're doing printed ones anymore. Printed magazine seems to be a thing of the past for Nikon, same as brochures. But at least you can read it online and look at all the pretty pictures.
Absolutely. The print is dying. The mantra they were repeating for the last 5 years. So it seems like, Nikon Pro, I think the last issue we had about maybe 2 years ago. This one is obviously online only with lots of digital Z mirrorless system goodies in there. Nikon Owner, something that we publish ourselves, is still alive and kicking. So if you want to have a printed magazine about Nikon, then it could be a good option for you.
Shall we move on to reviews? I think that's a good idea.
Yes, let's have a look at Chris Frost reviews of Z400 f4.5 lens that he had on his YouTube channel. Obviously, have a look at this. We're not going to spoil anything, but I will spoil it anyway. So basically, he loves it. He highly recommends it. He thinks for people who can afford it, it's a fantastic option. So obviously, for a lot of people, it's unobtainable, but if you are who you are, then it's a good option for you.
Excellent. And for your weekend read and watch segment, photographer Ruben Wu uses drones to shed new light on Stonehenge for the National Geographic August cover. The article itself is very interesting, talks about how we can use drones and newer technology to create entirely different images of things that we've essentially seen plenty of times before. Well worth looking at. The images that he created there of Stonehenge are quite fascinating because he used drones to light it. So do go check that out when you get a moment.
Yeah, imagine, Becky, you're doing a location shoot and a drone is holding your softbox or reflector.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever next.
It's good to be rich and have all the technologies. If really I am Bruce Wayne of photography, then I will have only drones as my assistants, just full stop.
Yeah, exactly. Who needs humans? Then next up, we have a Nikon F2 review by Grainy Days on YouTube. If you're a lover of all things analog and you didn't get a chance to see Con and Gray's homage to the Nikon F, then check that out as well. That's also on YouTube, but this is a lovely little review that's been popped up there for the F2 for all our F2 lovers.
Yeah, Grainy Days is by far my favorite film channel on YouTube. If you can bear with this sense of humor, and knowing me, I will definitely. That's my type of thing, Then definitely check it out. It is very different from your normal reviews, but I think a lot of people would enjoy this. And speaking of enjoyment of photography, if you would like to see some stunning winning images of the 2022 World Sports Photography Awards, then head on to AP, Amateur Photographer website, who has a gallery of that. Apparently, they had over 7,000 entries into the contest, and the winners are in their gallery. So have a look at that.
Amazing.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us today.
Yes, thank you very much for watching and or listening. If you're on YouTube, please give us a like and a subscribe. If you're on a podcast platform, give us a follow, a rating, perhaps a review. It all helps massively for us to reach more of the Nikon community.
Absolutely. If you don't want to watch us but want to hear us, then yeah, definitely head on to Spotify, Amazon Music, and also Apple Podcasts. But if you do watch this video, there's also a super thanks button. So if you like this video and you want to support this show, then definitely this is the way to do it.
Absolutely. And then if you want to find us on the internet, we have Instagram profiles, believe it or not. I'm at Rebecca_Danese. The shop is at Nikon at Grays, and Con is at Konstantin Kochkin.
Fantastic. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.